And welcome back to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com. Joining me is my co-host, Shayne Kubas, contributor for Still Curtain. We are coming off our second straight, just disheartening loss. This Steelers offense has been abysmal. We're going to get to all that. Let's start by quickly recapping the Steelers-Browns game. Then we're going to get into some really, really concerning stats that Shayne and I both pulled up about the Steelers' offense so far this season. And then we're going to preview the Steelers versus Jets in week 4 and why that is such a pivotal game even this early in the season. So let's start with Steelers-Browns. This game did not go as planned, obviously. The Steelers ended up losing by multiple scores. That last touchdown at the end, kind of a garbage touchdown. They scooped it in for the score. It made the defense look even a little bit worse than what it was. But, man, some big takeaways from that. And one of the biggest that I have, Shayne, is this is the second straight week now. The Steelers have just been incapable of getting any sort of consistent pressure on the quarterback. They couldn't do it against Mac Jones, and they couldn't do it against Jacoby Brissett. This isn't exactly the cream of the crop quarterbacks that we're talking about here, but you can see why it's so important to get that pressure, because when these quarterbacks can step up, they've got that middle of the field wide open, and the Browns and Patriots in these last 2 weeks have just been able to make plays on them.
Yeah, and people have to remember, like, for the majority of quarterbacks, pressure is the one thing you can do that will be able to throw them off. And if you do not get pressure on an NFL level quarterback, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be able to find somebody open, or they're going to be able to at least run the offense the way it's supposed to be run. And you look at the way Brissett has played so far this year, when he's given time and he has opportunity to make plays, to his credit, he's been making them. And the same thing was the case in this game. He had Amari Cooper multiple times. David Njoku had a career day. Whenever you don't get pressure on guys like that, especially guys who are looking to take care of the football to just find the right guy, if you give them the time to do it, that's what you're going to see on defense.
It is so frustrating watching these teams over the last couple of weeks just nickel and dime them over the middle of the field, something that the Steelers there's that picture going around on Twitter right now where they're recropping the field there and it's just dirt. And we're like, nobody cares. I mean, Canada and Trubisky don't, because they don't use that part of the field anyway, but kind of comical, but in the same way, really sad that we're not exploiting that in the same type of way. So that's something we obviously need to see it happen. We need to see it happen soon. The Steelers offense is dropping to the bottom of the league in nearly every statistical department. So real quick, let's just drop our winners and losers against the Browns. I think probably you and I would agree that we're going to have more winners than losers in this contest.
Yeah, it just feels like there's always a few players every week, right, that are doing their job. They're trying to do everything they can, right? But it doesn't ultimately matter, because when you miss a guy like Watt, whenever the offense just isn't getting it done because of multiple reasons that we'll talk about, just because a few players step up, it isn't enough to get us over the hump.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and going on that as well with TJ Watt, I think Malik Reed has been bad. And I'm sorry. I wanted to see something, because his Denver tape was certainly better than what we're witnessing right now. The production was a lot better. But, man, this guy is just stonewalled at the point of attack. He's not getting involved in the run game, certainly not helping in terms of pressures and win rate. All that kind of stuff is near the bottom of the league right now. You need to see more from him. And that's why I feel like fans sometimes underrate how important a Melvin Ingram really was for the Steelers last year. It didn't matter that Ingram had no sacks by the time that he kind of forced his way out the door there. He was getting pressure at a high rate, and that is very beneficial to a defense. And that's something that the Steelers just can't seem to do without TJ Watt. And so I want to point to that. And going with that, I think the secondary really struggled as a result of that. I think that works both ways. This secondary looked amazing in week 1 against Joe Burrow. Now, Burrow had the yardage numbers. They did get to play that extra quarter in overtime, and Burrow's a good quarterback. But when you take the ball away, 4 interceptions against Joe Burrow, that's a great game. I mean, this has not looked the same these last 2 games. I've had high hopes for Witherspoon. I'm not giving up on him yet, but he did get eaten alive in this last game, and we need to see that start to trend the other direction in terms of how his play is going. And then obviously offensively, man, we're going to talk about Canada and Trubisky. Lots of fingers to point there, and lots of blame to pass around. Do you have any other losers for this game for the Steelers?
I mean, you touched on Witherspoon. As much as he played very poorly, you look at the way that they game planned for Amari Cooper, asking him to try to cover him one-on-one multiple times during the game. There's a reason why Cooper was the only receiver with more than, I think, 10 receiving yards outside of Njoku, the tight end. Like, It
Mhm.
just they don't have anyone else that can consistently win right now. So the fact that they couldn't or did not shade more coverage his way and Njoku's way in the middle of the field, that's I think more of a play calling on defense situation than just Witherspoon being bad. Although he was, I can't say he wasn't,
Mhm.
bad, but I do think he has better potential than that. I mean, obviously, I think he might be in his head a little bit after that weird Aguilar touchdown in week 2, and I think he just needs to get his head on right, and hopefully sitting out the rest of that game and having a chance to heal up with his, I think it was the
The hamstring injury.
hamstring injury. Hopefully, he's good and kind of just move on to hopefully a better game this week. So he is
Yeah,
definitely one. Yeah,
I think you hit that perfect though too, because I wrote about that just beforehand as well. I'm like,
yeah,
stop Amari Cooper, stop the running game. I mean, that should be your focus. Single everybody else, nothing else matters. We saw that Cooper is coming off a 100-yard game, the game prior to that, in a game in which the Browns were able to put up 30 points, and so that was going to be key. They weren't able to do that, and so the Steelers ended up losing that game. There were many reasons why, but that was just one of them. If we're going to give a winner in this game, do we have any winners for the Steelers? I mean, not a lot offensively, I wouldn't think, but what do you got for us?
I think the offensive line played very well again overall, and I think that's what's so frustrating. We've touched on this before. Is we all expected coming in the season that the biggest liability for this football team was the offensive line, despite bringing in some guys to help out, and those guys have helped out. We didn't really expect it to be anything more than maybe like at the best case scenario, maybe a top 25-ish offensive line instead of a bottom 3 like last year. But they've really held up, especially in the passing game so far. They really aren't making Trubisky's life difficult. There's plays to be made there, even in the run game, more and more every week, it seems like. But we just can't capitalize on it. So I think they did a good job. I'm not going to blame them really at all for this week. I think that in general, the defensive line, again, they cannot get pressure. But I do feel like Highsmith at least turned it on a little bit near the end of the game, gave us a chance to get back in it with that sack to kind of get us back into that situation where we have a chance to go score. And the offense just didn't get it done. So I think those guys tried their best at the very least. I don't know if I'd call them winners per se, but I think that there's things that we can look at and improve on from here, but it's going to be all down to what happens offensively with the play calling.
And I do want to applaud the Steelers for shifting the attention in the direction of Myles Garrett, which that was like key number one right there. That's what you needed to do. I feel like they contained him pretty well for the most part. He got some really quick pressures in there, bulldozed Dan Moore on a play or two, but they were able to keep him off the box score at least and keep anything from being too detrimental to their offense. Their offense struggled for plenty of other reasons. For winners for me, I agree. I think the offensive line did an overall pretty good job. I want to single out Chukwuma Okorafor in particular. I think this guy has been pretty rock solid these first 3 weeks, going back and watching the tape. I think he's the most well-rounded of the group right now in terms of run blocking, pass protection. Did get flagged for the illegal man downfield last year. And what's the thing with everybody wanting him like suspended for falling on after? I understand the guy got hurt. It's unfortunate, but it wasn't Okorafor's fault. And that's part of the game. Offensive linemen, they're allowed to fall on someone. They're actually taught to do that after the play. And so that player can't get back up and make a play on the football.
Yeah, I've been seeing that float around Twitter. Like, I understand. It looks, especially if you don't understand offensive line play or you haven't seen that happen many times, because it's not highlighted usually, right? Like, you might see it on your first watch, but they're not going to go back and say, oh, wow, look at, because it happens more than people think. So they don't go back and watch it on the replay. Because that player got hurt, obviously that's highlighted. People see it. It doesn't look good to them. And that's all fine and well. But people who are respected in the NFL community have come out and said, like, hey, this is perfectly fine. This is teaching tape. Like, this is what we tell guys to do. It obviously didn't work out well for the Browns player, and that's not good, obviously. But it wasn't Okorafor trying to jump on a guy and hurt him. It was finishing the play and making sure he was out of the play, and that's what they're taught to do.
Yeah, I certainly don't think it was malicious. I want to highlight one more winner here in this game, and I'll put him on the offensive side of the ball, actually, and that's Jaylen Warren, who had kind of limited action. But, man, I've been impressed with what he's been able to do in terms of his burst and quickness through the hole, his contact balance. Obviously, the opportunities are still very limited. I think he's getting like roughly 28% of the snaps right now. But on that catch and run, I know there was the penalty, and that's the play that we were just talking about with the Okorafor. That guy was able to chew out a huge, he was like to the tune of like 60 yards or something after the run. And he just looked so explosive on that. And it didn't count, obviously. It was negated by the penalty. But I want to see the Steelers kind of do more of that stuff with Jaylen Warren. And I just feel like this is a guy that's going to be able to offer him maybe a little bit of that punch that they've been missing these last couple of years. in the running game and in the screen game. And so I liked what he was able to do in that contest as well.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Let's talk about give me your overall biggest takeaway from this game. What is it? Steelers versus Browns.
I think the biggest takeaway is that this team is still very far away from having an offensive identity, right?
Mhm.
We've seen the same type of things that have plagued them for the whole season so far in all 3 games. And to me, and that's where I kind of start with the whole play calling, and we're going to get into, Canada and Trubisky situation, but the inability to understand, okay, what I'm doing right now, what we're doing as an offense is not working. It is not, there's no evidence to suggest that it's working, nothing. But to continue to still do a lot of the same things outside of a few like hurry up drives, and at the end of the game, they finally got Freiermuth involved in the middle of the field a little bit. They show flashes of that, but then they completely ignore it the rest of the time. And to me, it's either stubbornness from Canada and him saying, hey, this is my offense, I'm running it the way I want to, or it's also a combination of Trubisky not being willing to change his play style from what he did at the end of his time in Chicago. We talked about it last week. He's a guy that I think he is legitimately scared to make mistakes because of how he was treated when he did make them in Chicago. And that is limiting his upside as a quarterback, even though he has some. I think athleticism-wise, his arm, there's nothing really there that says he can't be better than this. He's not like he's playing up to his talent level. He just isn't being willing to go ahead and be basically not afraid to make mistakes like you see some of the best quarterbacks do.
Yeah, it's certainly a combination of the two. And you and I are going to put a percentage on that, on what we think here in just a few minutes. Let me give my takeaway real quick. I touched on this a little bit. I think the pass rush is just completely non-existent without Watt, which is super concerning because that's how the defense revolves around that. The defense revolves around getting quick pressure. It's not like they've invested heavily into their cornerbacks for this great coverage for 3, 4, 5 seconds. They can't do that. And they've showed that even against mediocre quarterbacks these last couple of weeks. And offensively, my takeaway coming away from this is like going back and watching all 3 games multiple times, watch the all 22. These pass plays are designed to go to the sidelines. And we're going to talk about how bad that is capping the Steelers offense. But that's a huge takeaway from this week. It's been the same for the first 3 weeks. And it's something that's super concerning. All right, let's get to our next discussion topic here. The Steelers are making some changes. And not the changes that fans would like to see them make yet. No Kenny Pickett. Mitch Trubisky is going to be the quarterback. But the one thing that they did announce this week, Mike Tomlin said that Tyson Alualu is taking a backseat now. Montravius Adams, backup nose tackle, is now going to be the starter. How do you feel about that? How do you think that those 2 guys have played so far?
I do think you're right to say it's not the changes we wanted to see, and we'll talk about some of the changes we might want to see. But this was something that I think needed to happen. You look at the on-off splits with him and Adams on the field against the run. I think it's 5 yards per carry when Alualu's in there, and then 2.8 or 6 whenever Adams in there. Obviously, sample sizes are different, but I think ultimately we kind of should have, and I to a certain degree did expect that this might happen with Tyson. He's an older player. He's coming off a major lower leg injury. That drive off your leg is such an important part of being a nose tackle, being able to plug up space. It's going to happen with a guy like that. And I think them moving on now and letting him kind of take a back seat, maybe using him better, more sparingly, maybe you can get a few better plays out of him than you've been getting, and let a young guy like Adams, who luckily did get to make the roster and is there now playing. I think that he has the potential to be a guy like him for the next couple of years for them, hopefully, who can be that guy in the middle of the defense for them.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I don't know if I view Adams as anything more than like that stopgap player, but I hope he can be a little bit more than that. He played 5 games for the Steelers at the end of last season. I thought he played pretty well overall, considering how depleted their defensive line was and the fact that he had just joined the team. And so I do think he'll be an improvement over the Tyson Alualu that we are seeing now. And I kind of urged people before to temper your expectations with Alualu. We now have a 35-year-old nose tackle who is coming off a season-ending ankle injury, missed 15 games last year. We knew that it could be a scenario where it was more than just rust, where this really might be the end of his career. And that's how it's looking right now, honestly. And the question that I've had these first 3 games is, where is Isaiah Loudermilk?
Yep.
Like the Steelers moved into the 2021 draft. They spent a future 4th-round pick to do so. They got their guy that's 6'6" and a quarter, is now about 315 pounds. They got this guy to stop the run, and they're not activating him. They're not giving him a chance to get in there. Now, I'm not saying that the Loudermilk's going to be the savior of the run defense that is 28th in the NFL right now, but I think that could help, especially with Alualu playing the way that he has been so far, it makes me wonder if Tyson should not only be benched, but maybe go as far to say, maybe you should be the game day inactive, and maybe we can bring up Loudermilk, who happens to be 11 years younger, as fresh player that's ready to go and only had a handful of snaps last year. Like, I want to see that guy get involved, and maybe he offers something and maybe he doesn't, but you drafted him to be a run defender. This team needs run defense. So theoretically, let's give the guy a shot.
Yeah, and all reports in camp too, like you said, he put weight on. He's obviously a bigger player. That's what he should be doing, is being a run defender and high effort guy. That's what they need right now on this defensive line. Even though as a pass rusher, he probably isn't going to offer a lot, he's at least going to have the effort and he can give guys a blow. Like, you can get Hayward some rest, that way he isn't constantly dealing with double teams every rep and not even be able to come out of the game. Like, you can get something out of him that you haven't been able to get out of Alu so far. So I wouldn't be surprised if that change happens pretty soon, especially if in limited snaps he's still not producing. Then you might see, like, Tyson, we're going to keep you inactive for now. Like, they have to have that conversation, obviously, with him. But at some point, they have to go to the guy, like you said, that they invested a draft pick in.
Yeah, I think so too. And you want to be able to see Hayward at this stage in his career be able to get some more rest. Like, the guy's still playing far too many snaps. The Steelers are asking him to do too much. So somebody's got to step up to the plate here. And it's really there's really been nobody on that interior defensive line who has really stood out in a positive light. I think they've all been okay or just so-so, but and it's early in the season, but I would like to see a combination of Leal and Wormley and Loudermilk and some of those guys be able to give him that rest that he needs. So we'll see if they can do that. All right, Tomlin confirmed that Trubisky is going to be the quarterback this week. Didn't throw us through a loop. Wasn't anything crazy. However, in the back of my mind, I thought, and we talked about this before, the Steelers are entering week 4 against the New York Jets, who not exactly the greatest franchise out there right now. You get a home game, you get 10 days to prepare. We said maybe this would be a time that we could see them make that change to Kenny Pickett. Trubisky's averaged 5.5 yards an attempt. The Steelers offensively, if you don't count the Minka pick 6, have scored 15.6 points per game. And so it's not good. And it's right close to the bottom of the league. And so we thought maybe this is a chance for change, but I'm not surprised to see Trubisky keep his job. Are you?
Surprised? No, because I know how this team operates. I know what they're trying to do. But I think, and I said this, I think, last week, and I've said it in some of the report card articles I do for the Steel Curtain about the quarterbacks. At this point, the whole reason you start the veteran to start the year, and I understood why they did that for sure. It was the easy decision at the time. Is because you want to compete, right? You want to win the games that you expect a veteran quarterback to be able to win, because especially if you're more talented than the other team or if you're just more disciplined than them, that's a guy that you hope can get you the wins. He hasn't done that. He's not elevated an already bad offense, right? Like, that's where he's dealing with a bad offensive play calling situation. We know that. But if you're the veteran quarterback, you have to be able to at least do a little bit more to overcome that than he's done so far. And I think he is legitimately getting in his own way at times. And if that's going to be the case, I'd much rather let Pickett go out there and figure things out, figure out who he is as a player within an offense that obviously isn't great. But I think he naturally will attempt more of the throws that aren't getting thrown right now. And that's a big deal for this offense if they want to get going a little bit.
I started with 2 reserves about starting Kenny Pickett from the gate. Or I'm sorry, I started with 1 and now I have 2. And it's not even the same one. Like, the initial reserve that I had was, can this offensive line hold up well enough to protect him, or is he going to be getting hammered and getting his confidence shot every play? That doesn't seem to be an issue so far. Like, the line is far from perfect, but they're offering some help for Dan Moore, and I think the other guys are doing a pretty solid job. And so that's not a big issue. Now the reserves that I have about Pickett potentially playing would be, is Matt Canada going to handicap this guy? Is he going to be able to do anything on his own, or is everything going to be so scripted that it's going to be the Matt Canada show and he's got the 1 or 2 reads and that's it? Kind of like we saw from the preseason, but maybe even with less success, because that's what we've seen from the Steelers so far. And now I lost my talking point for my second one, but there was another reason. Oh, okay. So the second one is not something that I thought would be a big issue before, but this next stretch of game following the Jets up to the bye week is brutal. Like, you've got the Bills on the road, the Bucks at home, the Dolphins on the road, and the Eagles on the road. One could argue that those are like 4 of the 5 best teams in football right now. And I think that it's possible that the Steelers could get it handed to them in each of these 4 games. And so if you didn't start Pickett this week against the Jets, I think the next window of opportunity doesn't come until the bye week. I don't know if I want to
That
throw
might
him
be
into
fair.
any of those games.
That's kind of the issue though too, and that's why I think if they were going to do it before the bye week, it would have had to be this week, and I think it would have made sense to because you give him a chance to actually play in the NFL against a team that you can beat, you're capable of beating, I think, and it wouldn't be a surprise to anyone, right? And now that they're not doing that, unless Trubisky really just it gets so bad that it's even worse than it is now, and like he looks like a mess, and they see there's no way we're going to be able to win games with him. Let's at least see if Pickett can do it. That's the only scenario I could see them moving to him at this point before the bye week. So I think if because of the way this week is going, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him until then, like you said.
Yeah, I would agree. And the back half of stretch of games is looking much more manageable. You still have some tough divisional games, a couple against Baltimore, one against Cincinnati. And then I believe that they get Deshaun Watson back for the Browns next time,
So,
right?
yeah.
Theoretically.
So.
So that it's still not going to be easy. The Steelers still have a tough schedule, but man, this slate after the Jets is just completely brutal. And I would hate to put him into a situation like that, especially when I think the window would have been this week. Like this would have been like the warm-up game you go to get to Jets. Not that it's a guaranteed win for the Steelers. It's certainly not. But I mean, that one, you're at home, you got 10 days to prepare. They're not doing it now. I don't think they do it until after the week 9 bye, if I had to guess.
Most likely, yeah.
Let's talk about, you and I each came up with the most concerning stats for the Steelers this year. And I've got one that if you haven't read the article yet that I posted, it's just mind-boggling. I've never seen anything like it before. And I'd have to go back into like StatHead or the archives and try to find when the last time this happened. But get this, through the first 3 games for the Steelers this year, their entire wide receiver corps, this is excluding running backs and tight ends, but their entire wide receiver corps has combined for 25 yards after the catch in 3 games. Let me give you a little bit of perspective with that right now. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, 2 receivers on the Dolphins, very good ones, but 2 receivers. They have combined, just the 2 of them, through 3 games for 236 yards after the catch. The Steelers aren't on a pace to have as many yards by the end of the season as what Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill do right now after the catch. It's so concerning. And what this tells me, just like the film backs up, is that this is very much a Matt Canada problem. Trubisky is not blameless in this. He's missed receivers over the middle field. But these plays, and it's very easy to see, are designed to go to the sideline. They're either go routes, hitches, or they're out routes that go that lead the receiver to the sideline. And this is why you're not getting any explosive plays from the receivers after the catch. This it just blew my mind when I looked that up, and I'm like, I can't believe how poor this is right now. And where did the Steelers go from here?
When you tweeted that out and I saw that stat, I had to double check it because I thought, like, did he miss a number in front of there? Or, like something didn't seem.
It would have seemed that way, yeah.
Right. And then I thought about it for a whole 2 seconds. It was like, yeah, actually, that makes sense. I'm not going to even. I'm sure he's 100% right because you look at it and you talked about it. All the route concepts have them going to the sideline. And again, I don't understand that one bit because this is a guy who I've seen talk about how he likes yards after catch. He wants to create those situations for his receivers. He would be fooling us if that's the case because nothing is happening to that part of the field. They're not getting over the middle of the field. They're not even running routes that break out from the middle of the field out to the outside where they can run up the sideline. It's not even that. Like, that would be at least something. But they're not even doing that. They're running the quick outs, like you said, go routes that don't even get targeted until recently. None of it is really making any sense if you're trying to create easy situations for your quarterback. Because, one, those throws can be very tough. They can be, depending on the coverage you're getting. And then on top of that, again, you're not going to have the opportunity for your guys to make plays for your quarterback that isn't exactly a world beater. We know this. Even at his best, Trubisky's not a top 10 quarterback. Like, you need to give him the opportunity to let his playmakers that we've acquired over the years make plays for him. And I think Claypool, especially from the slot now, really is not benefiting from this because if you hit him on some deep crossers, get him in the middle of the field, he can run around through people. Like, that's what he does well. And they're not using him like that. They're using him as basically a gadget player, which that's a whole other thing that we can talk about. But everything about it just frustrates me because we have guys who can do that. It's not even that our receivers are incapable of being yak guys. They just aren't getting the opportunity.
Yeah, and we've seen that. Like, I think Deontay Johnson is one of the more slippery receivers
Yes,
after the
100%.
catch in open
Yeah.
field, making guys miss. And like you said, Claypool can just long stride away. Like we saw him from the slot a few times last year where he was just able to take that right over to the sideline and turn it upfield. And so it's so disheartening that they're not being utilized in this fashion at all. And it scares me. It's again, it's going back to Kenny Pickett. It's the reason why I would be a little bit scared to put him in right now, because he's not being aided by his receivers at all. And it's not the receiver's fault when the plays are designed to go to the hashes, to the boundaries, and they can't make things work after the catch. And take a look at the Dolphins, like what they've done in these first 3 games. My goodness, Mike McDaniel. I mean, is he not a candidate for coach of the year right now or what? Like, this guy is getting his receivers in space, and he's making Tua look like an all-pro quarterback right now because they're working so well after the catch. And I credit Tua. Tua's had some really nice throws down the field and everything as well. But this is a guy who really struggled last year. Tua really struggled last year for the Dolphins, and people wondered, is this the guy that we can even move forward with? Like, that the play was that bad at times. And now you look at him, he's towards the league in yards per attempt, all that stuff. His efficiency is through the roof right now, but he's aided because his receivers are able to do half of their damage after the catch, which just has not been the case for the Steelers at all right now. I think Deontay Johnson, I just saw the stat pop up, I believe he's 3rd in the NFL in yards before the catch, yards at the catch point, but it's not worth the compromise because when you can't get anything after the catch, you're relying on all that damage to come there, and you're lacking all those explosive plays. And so that is my concerning stat. I think I mean, I can make a case that might be the most concerning stat in football this year, so through 3 games, because I've never seen anything like it before. So Shane, what do you have for us?
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to disagree with you on that, though, just as far as like the most concerning, because it's so ridiculous sounding. It just doesn't even make sense logically. But yeah, I will say I have one that's not quite as concerning because it makes more sense and it's more understandable because of, unfortunately, it feeds into the situation. But right now, the Steelers are 31st in time of possession per drive. So they're averaging 2 minutes and 15 seconds of drive time per drive that they have. I didn't double check who's last. It doesn't really matter. They're probably right there with them. I can't imagine that there's a significant gap there. Point is, though, is clearly this team cannot sustain drives, and that's part of the problem too. It's one thing to just not create big plays, but if you can at least sustain drives, you can churn out drives, keep the defense off the field, get field goal at least, and get points on the board more often than not. I can live with that, especially with the personnel we have and the quarterback we have. We're not even doing that because the defense is on the field. They're 30th in time of possession that they have to be on the field at 3 minutes and 20 seconds. A minute difference in time of possession per drive for your offensive defense is not sustainable to have any shot of winning games. I mean, just look at the Bills. Even they had to deal with that where they were on the field for 42 minutes and they could still barely win because their offense wasn't efficient. At least with us, we don't even have the chance to be on the field long enough to actually try to get drives going. And it's partly because of the play calling, obviously, but also we're not efficient running the ball yet. Still at this point, the passes, when they are, like I said, there's no chance for them to get extra yards after they catch it. Everything about the offense is basically, it almost feels tailor-made to get off the field as soon as possible, but not for scoring, just getting off the field.
Yeah, those splits are so concerning, and it's a recipe for disaster. Like, I know the Steelers came into the season wanting to play ball control offense, run the football, but guess what? When you're only average at best running the football and you can't control the clock, you got to scrap that game plan. You got to try something else because it's not working. The defense is completely gashed. You could see it. The end of both of the last 2 games, like the tackling was abysmal versus the Browns last week. I know a lot of that has to do with maybe being on a short week, not having TJ Watt. There's some other factors in there. But, man, these guys are gassed. You can see it. They've played far too many snaps at this point, 100 on the dot in week 1. And so it's just – and some of that, it's obviously not the defense's fault. It's the offense because they couldn't put the game away sooner than that. But this pace can't continue. And so I agree. That is a very concerning stat. Let's take a look at Canada and Trubisky, the 2 biggest Steelers personnel talked about so far in these first 3 games, and for good measure because both of them have their hand in how poor this offense has been to this point. Like I said, 15.6 points per game, near the bottom of the league in just about every statistical category, including DVOA. How much blame would you put on Canada, and how much blame would you put on Trubisky? And Shayne, I want you to I'm going to ask you this as a percentage. So give me a percent blame to Canada and a percent of the pie to Trubisky.
I think at this point, I was fluctuating kind of back and forth with this over the first 2 weeks. And the more I look at it, I think it's about a 60-40 split. I think Canada is definitely the majority of the problem to a certain degree. But I think that the way that Trubisky plays naturally, because of how he chooses to play football, it's exacerbating that existing issue, right? So he's taking a conservative game plan and saying, hey, what if I make it more conservative? That's pretty much the way he's playing. And again, I understand that's who he is as a quarterback. I think that we kind of all knew that if you look back at his last few starts in Chicago, especially. But Canada knows that too. And the fact that he's still calling a game plan that does not ask him really to do much with the football outside of throw it short or attempt long deep balls down the field that usually don't go anywhere, it's making that problem even worse for both ends of things. So I still blame Canada mostly because he could and should be trying to formulate something that takes away some of that concern more than he is. And the fact that he's not is making Mitch look that much worse by proxy.
Yeah, I've heard so many different opinions on this matter right now. There's some people that are like, it's all Trubisky, some people that are all Canada. Someone that I very much respect in the football business has told me that he believes that it's 90% Canada and 10% Trubisky.
Okay.
My number and my figure that I've used in an article as well is very similar to what you have. I have 65% of the blame going to Canada, 35% of the blame going to Trubisky. And it's just after I've watched these games, like I said, I've watched them all several times now, watched the All-22 film. There are certainly some missed opportunities by Trubisky. Like even on the George Pickens catch, like great throw, better catch, one of the best we've seen. But Claypool was wide open in the middle, waving his arms. There wasn't somebody within a 15-yard radius around him. Yeah. And so and that wasn't the only one either. There are more like that. And so I think from the beginning, this has kind of been a lethal combination of the two because you've got a coordinator that is so set in his ways and wants to do everything to the boundaries, go to your first read. And you've got a quarterback who is kind of willing to go along with that. And one that I don't really think sees the field particularly well. I mean, it would be different if Trubisky was a guy who had averaged 7.5 yards and attempted his career, whatever. He averages 6.6 in his career. And so it's lower than that now, but it's a guy that's always been near the bottom of the league in that department. I think it's because he is a system quarterback who kind of has to go through his progressions. Pro Football Focus has an advanced stat out there where Trubisky is far and away the number one quarterback in the league in terms of throwing to his first read. And it was by a large margin, like 30% or something wild as well. So that's something to consider as well. So I do think a lot of that falls on Trubisky. However, when your game plan simply has nothing to do with the middle of the field, where good teams are required to be successful on offense, that is going to hurt so bad. And like the stat that I just mentioned, 25 wide receiver yards after the catch this year through 3 games is just completely inexcusable. I mean, that's what you should get on just like 1 or 2 chunk plays, and you have it right there. And they played 3 games worth, and they don't have it yet. And so I feel like that's going to be my split. I still am leaning towards Canada's the bigger factor. However, if I were to say who's more likely to lose their job, obviously it's Trubisky because the Steelers don't love their in-season firings. And Kenny Pickett is waiting in the wings here. They do not have an option at offensive coordinator. I hope that it's not going to be Mike Sullivan. I'm kind of burnt out with the in-house hirings there. We can get into that topic on a later date. But let's move on. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and you would like to support the Still Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Still Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate your support. All right, let's talk Steelers versus Jets, Week 4 matchup. Who would have thought that this game would mean this much at this point? But in the NFL, when there's only 17 games, every game matters. Steelers get the 2-1 or the 1-2 Jets this week, same records what the Steelers have. And I think this game is really important because if the Steelers fall this week to 1-3, like I said, you've got Bills, Bucks, Dolphins, and Eagles coming up before the bye. And there's a chance that Steelers could go 0-4 in that stretch with the way that they're looking right now. Steelers are it started off 3.5-point favorites. I saw that line just changed like an hour ago, according to FanDuel Sportsbook. It now is tightened a little bit, and the Steelers are only 3-point favorites over the Jets right now. How do you see that game going? Do you think the Steelers are right to be favored? And what do you think that do you think the Jets would actually be favored in this game if this game was in New York?
I think if it was in New York, it's probably a toss-up based on the line. I think it's
Mm.
basically like maybe .5, Steelers or whatever it may be. But honestly, I don't know if obviously there's different reasons why they make the lines the way they do, but I don't think I would favor the Steelers even in the situation. You look at their offense, and I understand the Jets put up 12 points last week against the Bengals. Steelers have beat the Bengals, although again, a lot had to happen for that to take place. I just don't know if any team that they play, if you can expect this team to put up 20 points offensively. And if they can't put up 20 points offensively, I don't think you can favor the team. That's just kind of where I think you're at in the NFL at this point. I know scoring's been down a little bit this year, actually, overall. But if you can't score 20 points and you have not shown that you can score 20 points, I don't think you deserve to be favored. So that's kind of my opinion. I know why they're being favored to a certain degree, but I don't think I would make that bet, honestly.
I think that's fair. I really do. These last 2 weeks, I got it wrong because I've been optimistic in saying, all right, the Steelers offense, they're going to get it this week. 1 or 2 more explosive plays. There's the extra difference in the 3-4 points. They haven't done it yet. And so I understand exactly where you're coming from. Until the Steelers do it, then it's hard to predict that they will. And so I do think that changes need to be made. I hope that we see them happen, obviously, but we're just not there yet. So we'll get to our predictions here in just a minute, but let's talk about the matchups, some of the big matchups to watch this week. Nobody incredibly daunting on the Jets roster right now. They do have some young up-and-coming guys, but not like a Myles Garrett that you have to account for, or Nick Chubb that you can chew off 150 yards on any given game. And so what do you have as some of the biggest matchups this week?
I think it's the run defense versus this combo of backs for the Jets. Like I know they're young, and Breece Hall's a rookie player and Carter's second year, but they've looked pretty good overall. I think especially Hall is better pure runner. I think Carter still adds a little bit more versatility in the passing game, but those two combined, I wouldn't be shocked, especially the way the run defense has played so far. Even with Adams coming in there and hopefully helping things out compared to Lulu, I just won't be surprised if that's how the Jets move the ball on us and that's how they keep possession and keep the defense on the field longer than we want them to be, is by leaning on that run game. And if it works, Zach Wilson coming back and being rusty won't matter nearly as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the running game is going to be big because both of those guys, they can chunk off big yardage in a hurry. And so they both have plenty of speed to do that. That's something they'll definitely have to contain. I want to watch the Steelers edge defenders this week. And like I said, 2 straight weeks in a row where we've gotten just very little overall. Highsmith has offered some there. The pass rush win rate is not where I would like it to be right now, but I still think Highsmith is doing a good job considering the circumstances, considering he doesn't have Watt on the opposite side of him. Malik Reed, that's a different story. I think he's just been pretty downright awful so far. If you can't win this week against these Jets offensive tackles, there's going to be issues. I mean,
I don't even know who it is at this point, right? Because
that's the thing is they've lost two tackles for the season right now. There are 3 of them actually. They've lost Mekhi Becton, Dwayne Brown, and then they just recently lost George Fant to IR. And so right now it looks like it's going to be Connor McDermott and Max Mitchell. Those are your 2 tackles you have to go against. So if what I want to say is if the Steelers, if just doing like a straight 4-man rush isn't working, blitz someone off the outside, blitz somebody up the middle. That you have to be able to generate pressure. And especially this game, I think too, you don't want to let Zach Wilson sit back there and get comfortable in his first game. This is a guy who can make plays down the field. He can extend the play once he gets comfortable. And Wilson has not had a ton of success, but you don't want to allow him to get in that rhythm like that we saw Mac Jones and Jacoby Brissett get in each of the past 2 weeks. So that the pressure from the edge defenders, I think, is going to be key in this one. Do you have any other matchups for us this week, Shane?
I think, and we'll touch on this guy, I think, a lot more as years go on because I really like him already. Garrett Wilson looks legit as a receiver one for this team. And I think when you factor in the fact that Corey Davis is there and he's had a couple of explosive plays still, there's just too many guys there that I think the Steelers cornerbacks are going to have a rough time if the pass rush can't get home. And they haven't proven they can. Even against these tackles, I expect, obviously, to be better, especially I think Highsmith will be able to make some more impact plays. But if they have to cover for 3-4 seconds, these guys are going to get open, especially Garrett. Like, he's just been unbelievable as a route runner so far. And he scored the game-winning touchdown against the Browns. Everything he's done has translated from college to the NFL. And I don't know if any of our guys, especially Witherspoon, if he's still not really in his head, because I'm assuming he might draw that matchup often. I don't think he can hang with him as right now at this point. So
Yeah, the Steelers have given up 100-yard receivers in every game so far,
Yes.
and this could very well be another one. I agree with you. I think that Garrett Wilson is off to a rocking start with his career. He's graded out very well, and he just looks like he has the traits to be that number one go-to guy. And so I think stopping that pass is going to be key. But again, it starts with that pass rush there. I want to talk about Zach Wilson because there are statements out there, and I'm currently in the midst of an article as well, is it better for the Jets, just not in the long run, but right now, for the chances against the Steelers to play Zach Wilson or to play Joe Flacco? Like, I know that Flacco is only 1-2. He's had 2 poor offensive games, but he's had one game where he scored 30 points. In one game, or actually in all 3 games, the Jets have averaged 370 offensive yards per game, which is good for 9th in the NFL. And so it's hard to imagine that number actually improving this week with Zach Wilson against the Steelers, especially considering he's got to shake off the rust. He's coming off a knee injury. So which quarterback do you think gives the Jets a better chance to win this game?
I think it's a very good question. I do wonder, for me, like, I think if you are the Jets, though, this would be a good game to put Wilson back in because you're probably not going to get a lot of pressure from the other offense, right? So, like, ideally, yeah, like Flacco probably, if you're just focused on winning, he is a veteran, obviously, is about as veteran as it gets in the NFL at this point. We know a lot about him, obviously, the Steelers do, but I think that he probably makes less mistakes overall, even though there's been a couple, boneheaded plays that you always get with Flacco. But overall, I think he's been pretty good. I think the problem is if you're the Jets, it doesn't matter if you win this game. It doesn't matter if Joe Flacco plays well. He's not the future, right? They need to find out as soon as possible. And Wilson, if he's healthy, if he's cleared, he has to be the guy because they have to find out realistically by the end of this year if he's the guy, because I don't think he lasts much longer than the end of this year if he's not playing well, and they need to give him the opportunity to go out and prove it.
Yeah, you really do. It's like that 2-year window really for quarterbacks, and you really have a good idea of who they are at that point. You might not know, you might be on the fence with somebody. There's always like the Daniel Joneses of the world. It's like, how long do we give this guy before we decide to move on? But Zach Wilson, so far, the sample has just not been there. And obviously the Jets have to do this, right? They have to go to their 23-year-old quarterback instead of continuing to roll with the 37-year-old guy. It's not like they're having great success anyway. Now, just looking at it this week and who gives them the best chance to win, I think Joe Flacco probably does, because he has that chemistry built with the receivers. He does have a win under his belt. And like I said, 9th in total offense right now. He's done some things well for them, and I think he's been pretty good still as a pocket passer. So as a Steelers fan, I'm kind of glad to see Zach Wilson come back in this game because I do think the Steelers should be able to get after him. We will see, and it'll be interesting to see where Zach Wilson goes from here. But let me just brief on some of his stats from last year, though. 5.3 adjusted yards per attempt was good for like rock bottom in the NFL. A 69.7 passer rating, a 28.2 QBR, and that goes with 9 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. So it's certainly not ideal production. Doesn't look like a franchise quarterback at this point in time. But like we said, the traits were there. We'll see if he can get it. They did build up a young cast around him, but the offensive line is missing some key players. This would just be one of those games typically where TJ Watt would just feed. And so it's too bad we don't have him in for this, but I am anxious to see what those Steelers edge defenders can do against those offensive tackles this week. All right, Shane, if you're to give me your key to success for the Steelers this week, other than outscoring the Jets, what would it be?
You have to, because of the way the passing game is, and I can't expect that to get better. I just can't. I really hope it does. I hope we have a couple broken plays to go away. Something has to break for this offense to be good passing the ball. But if that's not going to happen, the running game needs to pop off. It has to be a game where Najee Harris and Jalen Warren, whoever else is in, whoever it ends up being carrying the ball, we give it to Claypool on sweet, whatever. There has to be a few explosive, true explosive plays, and that gets you scores. That's going to be the key while we're dealing with this passing offense that I think could possibly be actually the possibility of happening. We've seen opportunities for it. Obviously, Najee Harris has had some issues with it. Occasionally it's more of a trust thing still too, but we've seen Warren have explosive plays. We had the little shovel pass, which that's just an extension of the run game. So that type of play too. That is how they're going to have to win right now if they want to put up points on offense, and that's what's going to have to happen against this Jets defense from the win.
It's really hard for me to make the key to success anything defensively, even with the step back the defense has taken the last 2 weeks. This is mainly an offensive problem, and it's one that needs to be fixed. I think the running game has done better, and I think that there's been holes there too. Like we've cut up before, and we saw that there's maybe a few missed opportunities by Najee, and the Steelers' run game overall has actually done pretty decent these last couple of weeks. It has to come in the passing game. I agree with you, and it has to come over the middle of the field. Canada has got to scrap those plays that he has and uses all the time, like the rollout pass for 5 yards to the sideline for Claypool. He's got to start passing the ball over the middle of the field. One thing that really irks me with Canada's offense too is, have you noticed, like on third down, he'll be more content like throwing a YOLO ball down the sideline than doing like a rub route or a slant or a drag or something that gets a receiver open for the yardage that you need. Like, why are we doing that on third down? Why is that not like a second and short play when you're taking a shot down the field?
Even the first deep ball they threw in the game last week that didn't end up getting completed on, I think, 3rd and 1. Because my whole problem with it is like, yeah, I'm glad you threw down the field. Do it on 2nd down. Because if you do it on 2nd down and it hits, you're a genius. If it doesn't hit, you have 3rd down. And we saw that even last year. You know, Ben was taking a ton of just random deep shots. It felt like on 3rd and 3 and 3rd and 2. It's like, I understand maybe you don't trust your run game. Don't throw the ball 40 yards down the field, though, on 3rd and 3. Like, that's just defenses. Yeah, they might not be expecting it, but you're not a team that can do that right now effectively. So that's a big problem. I think that even if you're going to throw the ball down the field on 3rd down, don't just run go routes or whatever. Like, you constantly throw the out routes, just running out and up. Have Deontay running out and up route, and just he's gonna beat the corner. Like, there's no way he's not going to on a play like that, because they're not going to expect him to do that, because they don't ask him to do it ever. Do something a little bit different, even if you're going to take that approach of go for it on 3rd down, deep down the field. Make it something the defense actually has to think about, and whether it's a double move, like I said, or something like that.
Yeah, and the analytics would tell the Steelers to do it the exact opposite way,
right?
Exactly. The way that they're doing it right now. Like take that shot on 2nd down, 3rd down, make sure you get the 1st down and keep the chains moving. It's why the Steelers are 31st in time of possession right now, and it has to change. And so I want to see them bring Johnson across the middle of the field. Let this guy get in space. I know do a Texas route with Najee out of the backfield. Like,
I'll take that. Yeah, that's fine.
Yes, utilize the middle of the field. That has to be key. And it's something the Steelers, like, you could go back and you go to next gen stats, look at those passing charts from Trubisky, and it's just a giant U shape with nothing going on in the middle. It looks like what's that? The second Batman movie there.
Oh,
like, yeah, where like the whole field is caving in. Well, you can do without that part right there, because we don't use it anyway.
Yeah, so at least the other team couldn't use it then too, so it would be good.
There we got it. Would be worth the trade off then for sure. All right, Shane and I are going to get to our predictions before we sign off for today. So Shane, go ahead and give me your score prediction for Steelers versus Jets in Week 4.
Well, I was right last week, unfortunately. So, but I kind of feel the same way, where like, until again they prove to me that they can put up more than 20 points even, really, because my score, I have 24-20 Jets. I think that the Jets are going to be able to put up enough points because they're going to be on the field a ton. Wilson will probably make a few mistakes, but one of his playmakers will make up for that. I think the run game is really going to be key for them, like I said before. If they can keep the ball and get, just even if it's field goals, and get a couple touchdowns, that's all they probably have to do to win this game until further notice. That's just kind of where I'm at with this offense.
Okay. Can't fault you for that. Like you said, you were right last week, and I've been a little bit too optimistic, I think, when it comes to the Steelers offense, just thinking that they're going to make changes that they're not making. And so I do want to say Steelers again this week for the 3rd time in a row. I have the Steelers winning 20-17, which is still under the point total. I have them at 37 total points. The point total is 40.5. The Steelers have been under for 2 of the 3 weeks so far. And so it's just so hard to envision like these games being shootouts anymore. Like, they're going to be slugfest. There's going to be ugly offensive play. So I do have the Steelers winning just by a field goal. I think that this is the first time, that's my prediction, first time the Steelers are going to get 20 offensive points in a game. They had 23 against the Bengals, but 7 of those came on a pick 6 from Minka Fitzpatrick. And so 15.6 points per game offensively. That number's got to climb. I would be hoping that Tomlin and Canada and Sullivan and all those guys are sitting down together right now saying, how can we make this offense more explosive? Let's just do a few minor tweaks, and maybe the Steelers offense can get to 20 points. All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us today on the Still Curtain podcast. You can follow Shane on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Steel Curtain Podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and please check us out on YouTube. Thanks for listening to the Steel Curtain Podcast.